Are you a frugalpreneur looking to connect with like-minded individuals? Join our community on Slack. Connect with fellow listeners, share your thoughts on episodes, engage in meaningful discussions, including money-saving tips and entrepreneurial insights, and help shape the future of the Frugalpreneur podcast. Plus, you can submit your questions in written or audio form to be featured on the show. Let's build a supportive space together. Join us now at frugal.show/Slack. See you on the inside. Welcome to the Frugalpreneur podcast. I am your host, Sarah St. John. This episode is what I refer to as a showcase episode where I feature a bootstrapped entrepreneur and they briefly share their tips, tricks, tactics, techniques, and tools that help them bootstrap their business and the successes and failures along the way. My hope is that each of these showcase episodes will provide at least one valuable takeaway that you could implement right away in your own bootstrap business journey. Now, on to the episode.
I started this business completely by accident. It wasn't something that I knew I was going to do. It wasn't something I was prepared to do. I was actually working for a really large big box store. It's a wholesale retailer. Everybody knows the name if I was to tell you it. And I worked there for a really long time. And I spent a considerable amount of my time working in their marketing department, refining it, growing it, figuring all the ins and outs. And as somebody who did not have a marketing background, I have an English degree. This was new, but it was something that I was really keen on. And it was actually something I was really good at. And eventually I grew out of that job and I ended up leaving and I went into investor relations and communications in gold mining. Totally different career. I used some skills that I had. And I was also in charge of running their in-person events. So large conferences, AGMs, and so on and so forth. And although that job didn't work out either because it was a bit of a startup culture. And as startups come and go, as we know, they start and eventually either they get bought out or close. All of a sudden, I found myself on my own and I didn't know what I wanted to do. I knew I didn't want to go back into another gold mining company. I knew I didn't want to go back into other things. So all of a sudden, here I am. I have this informal marketing background. I have all this experience in investor relations and communications. I have some strategic understanding of events, how to build them, how to run them because of both of those jobs. So I found out that there were these online events that were happening called online summits or virtual telesummits. And this is back in 2012. And it just seemed to fit and work for me. I absolutely loved it. So I started working in this space and built up a clientele really quickly. I went from about 0 clients to 38 clients in a space of about 6 months. It was awesome, a little bit overwhelming, totally fun, and really enjoyed it. That's where I've been working for a really long time and really just enjoyed that whole space. And actually now I'm moving a bit beyond it and I'm working in as a fractional CMO for a couple of companies, which is super fun, super amazing. And I love it. So that's the evolution, really. I don't feel like I did this exactly in the steps that I would do it if I could go back and start it all over again. But the steps that I did for bootstrapping the business was a lot of networking. And in 2012, we didn't have a lot of the platforms in terms of social media. We didn't have a lot of the networking opportunities. It was still a little bit isolating to be online, but it was very interesting because people were really gung ho and they didn't feel so, I guess the word would be put into their little spaces. Everybody was in all these Facebook groups and there were Facebook groups where there was 16 or 18,000 people because there wasn't that many Facebook groups in that particular niche. And it was just insane. You were making connections left and center. You could post a question in the group and suddenly you had 15 or 20 sales calls. So there were opportunities in that way. And I lacked quite a few things that would have helped me bootstrap it faster had I started my business now, say in 2024. But I really started building up my networking. I really started building up my email list. I worked really hard on my word of mouth. I got all my clients through referrals because I found that was the quickest way to close was warm traffic versus working twice as hard on cold traffic. So I spent all of my time on warm traffic. I would connect with people. I would work with people. I would gather testimonials from people. I would ask people if they knew anybody else that would be a really great fit to work with. And I worked that way. I also paid for referrals and that grew my business really quickly. And that was probably one of the best things I did was referrals. My biggest success with bootstrapping my business was getting my name in front of the right people and making sure that people knew that I was the go-to for one thing and one thing only, which at the time was virtual online summits. I didn't do anything else. I didn't do other activities as a marketer or as a service provider. I did summits and I did a lot of them and I did them really well. And I got people a ton of leads and a ton of sales. And I refined that process until I created a system that allowed people to hire me and not worry about how it was going to run. They just knew it was going to run really well and everything was going to be taken care of. That put me in front of people who my reputation then preceded me. So I would walk into a virtual room, like a Zoom room with a bunch of people, or join a Facebook group, or get connected with people. And they're like, oh, you were the person who runs the online summits, or oh, you're the person who did so-and-so summit. And that reputation preceding me allowed me to just make sales a lot easier. It was a ton of work in the back end, building up that reputation, but then it started paying off in dividends. It was the best thing I ever did. And on the opposite side, my biggest failure was making mistakes. I think everybody makes them, but making mistakes on the platforms to use in terms of the technology or spending money on things that I didn't need. And that took some of my time and my focus. And then the other thing that really was a struggle and my biggest failure was not spending the appropriate amount of time on building up my social cred on social media. I was a bit resistant there. I'm a bit of an introvert and I didn't like spending a ton of time on the social media apps. But I think if I had put myself out there a lot earlier, I would have had exponential growth in that space as well. My best tips and tricks and techniques that I would tell you to use are things like networking. It sounds redundant, but networking is one of the best things that you can do in terms of just growing your presence. But in the bootstrapping space, the things that really worked was working on my reputation, putting out consistent content. If I could get everybody to do consistently what I did, it would create so much growth. Really focus in on being niched in. I think people try and do too many things for too many people, and they should just really be focused in on the one thing that they can do really well until they're incredibly well known in that space before they add in a new skill or something else that they're doing. And then the other thing is, don't worry about having everything to be perfect. Like I didn't have the perfect website for 10 years. I didn't have the perfect social media. I didn't have all of that set and ready to go. And although those would have been incredibly beneficial, they were outside of my ability to do for various reasons for a very long time. So I did what I could. And my focus was always on building connection, creating consistency, and putting content out. And as somebody who is an introvert, who hides behind the camera more often than not, being out there was very difficult. So overcoming that was challenging. But the best thing I did was for a while there, I had a sort of Facebook Live thing that I had going. And I was doing 20 to 30 Facebook Lives a week, not because I needed to, but because it helped me get over my sort of irrational fear of being out there in front of people. And it helped my business a lot. So those kinds of things are really important. And I think they still stand true and they still help me now. I get myself on a ton of podcasts that are niched in, that are exactly where I should be. I have my own podcast, which I think is a fantastic thing. And it's really low barrier to entry. So if you want to get a podcast going, it's one of the best things you could do. And I think those will help. I would definitely recommend that you niche in, that you spend the time getting really good at the one thing that you want to be known for and own that space completely. Become the go-to person. That is going to grow your business, I think, really quickly. It really helps. I don't think people do it enough. And then this other really big thing that always comes up is this overcomplication process. People always overcomplicate, I find. Instead of having a really simple tech stack or a really simple method, there's like a convoluted sort of thing where instead of it just being step 1, step 2, step 3 to the sale, it becomes like 5 steps, 10 steps, and more steps that your potential ideal client has to go through before they actually get to the sale. Chances are you're going to lose more people. And then the last thing I would say is absolutely find the leaky holes in your boat, fix them ASAP. And that's going to help a great deal. And if anybody wants to connect with me, I'd love to connect. I'm all over Instagram. That's where I end up spending quite a bit of my time. Or you can go to jennywright.com. And I have some great resources there, including some great freebies. So you can go there and check those out. and I'd love to connect. So send me a DM on Instagram, and I'd love to hear from you. If there's anything that I can do to help you grow your business in terms of marketing and strategy, that would be something I'd be super happy to talk to you about. Thank you so much.
I hope you enjoyed that episode and were able to take away a valuable nugget of information that you can implement right away in your own business. If you feel your story would be valuable for the listeners of this show, please visit frugal.show/guest. Are you a frugalpreneur looking to connect with like-minded individuals? Join our community on Slack, connect with fellow listeners, share your thoughts on episodes, engage in meaningful discussions, including money-saving tips and entrepreneurial insights, and help shape the future of the Frugalpreneur podcast. Plus, you can submit your questions in written or audio form to be featured on the show. Let's build a supportive space together. Join us now at frugal.show/Slack. See you on the inside.